What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some battles in the Retro Cup with a triple buffed anti-meta team this season, with Conkeldurr, which of course had a community day earlier in the season, and Glaive Rush is such a strong move in this meta, Wormadam Plant, which got buffed with Energy Ball, and Shadow Conkeldurr, which gained access to Force Palm, and it absolutely bullies the normal types in this meta. Now towards the end I swapped out Wormadam for Kecleon since I was struggling a little bit up against flying types with this backline, and I still wanted a different Sucker Punch user to deal with the likes of Oranguru and other Psychic type Pokemon. But anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What do you think is the most underrated Pokemon in the Retro Cup meta this season? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Alright, so going into the first battle, leading Conkeldurr into Medicham. Of course, this is a bit of a core breaker to the team, so not ideal for me, but we're going to choose to stay in here, as of course, I'm not really taking much damage from these Psycho Cuts. I do unfortunately start one turn behind, and it feels like on the new code, basically every other game I'm starting one turn behind, and then in some of the other games, actually my opponents are starting behind, but it's kind of hard to tell who's starting behind. It's kind of just you're seeing that you're desynced with your opponent. It's super frustrating here, so what I would have liked to do is actually throw it on CMP there, but of course, I didn't get to the Glaive Rush in time. So instead, what we're going to do, bank a ton of energy, catch a resisted Dynamic Punch onto my Wormadam. Now, Wormadam, another thing that the reason why I did swap it out eventually is because I was using it as my safe swap, but it's just not a safe Pokemon at all. You go up against a flying or a fire type Pokemon, and it's going to get absolutely decimated. Luckily for me, there aren't too many of them in this meta. However, we do see a few of them here and there. Anyways, they're going to come in with Licky, commit to the farm down, but we've already got the Icy Wind loaded. Icy Wind, I'm going to throw this straight away, debuffing their attack stat, and now it's time to come in with Shadow Conkeldurr. Now, of course, I've just debuffed them. Shadow Ball is going to connect, but it doesn't do too much damage there. They're now going to come in with their final Pokemon, which is Oranguru. Of course, has a great matchup into us, but Brutal Swing does decent damage, and I'm very close to another charge move. Glaive Rush, we're able to get there in time. This will be enough damage to take out the Oranguru. Of course, they still have the Medicham in the back, but I can Dragon Breath farm them down before they get to the Ice Punch, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see Hisuian Electrode in the lead. So this is going to be a great lead matchup for me. I'm going to go for an Icy Wind here, debuffing their attack stat. I do expect them to be on Energy Ball and Wild Charge, both of which are resisted damage. However, 2 Wild Charges will actually pretty comfortably get the knockout, even with the debuff there. But the opponent's going to swap out into Licky. So I'm going to bank the energy and then come in with the Shadow Conkeldurr. Of course, going to shield the first charge move as the opponent is going to full send a Shadow Ball. However, now the opponent is just going to reach the Body Slam. So at this point, I'm happy to no shield here. Body Slam, not going to deal too much damage there, and I come out with back-to-back Dynamic Punches. Now, the opponent, I believe, is just one away from another Wild Charge, so there's no point going for an extra fast move here. Instead, we're going straight for Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch, not respected, gets the KO comfortably, and the opponent's final Pokemon going to be a Shadow Ninetales. So at this point, we're going to fire off another Dynamic Punch, grabbing that final shield, coming back in with the Conkeldurr, and going straight for a Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush, unfortunately, won't quite get the knockout from that range, but it is going to force them to throw some energy. This game is certainly over, but you know what? Because we can, I'm going to come in with my Wormadam, where, of course, we are taking double super effective damage from the fire typing, but one Sucker Punch gets the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. Heading into the next battle, GG's to that previous opponent, by the way, we're going to see a Furret in the lead. So I'm going to go straight for a Glaive Rush here. Glaive Rush, going to grab a shield advantage, and now I'm swapping into Wormadam. The opponent is actually going to go for a Brick Break there, hoping that I would stay in with the Conkeldurr, but that, of course, is not the case. At this point, the opponent is going to outpace me to a Swift. They debuffed my defense, so Swift is going to deal decent damage, but honestly, Wormadam is relatively bulky here. Of course, you can see I don't have the best IVs. I've not got an XL Wormadam by any means, but we will just barely reach back-to-back Energy Balls, and all shields are now down. First one, unfortunately, didn't debuff the defense, so we don't quite get the knockout, but now we're going to come back in with the Conkeldurr. I'm going to no shield, as I assume this will just be a Swift and not something like an Outrage, and now we swap into our Conkeldurr. Now the opponent is going to reach a Brick Break. I don't know what they've got in the back, so I'm just going to play this safe and use my shield here. And the opponent is going to have to reveal their final Pokemon, which is going to be a Blaziken, which is absolutely fine with me. Of course, Dynamic Punch easily gets the KO there. They come back in with the Kingdra. One more Force Palm gets the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I see Lurantis in the lead. So, the opponent's actually going to swap out straight away into a Quagsire. I'm actually going to choose to stay in here because I can outpace him to the first charge move. I'm going straight for Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush is going to be shielded. And now I swap here. This is a little bit risky. However, because I just debuff my defense, I expect a bait from the opponent. So, we swap out and we catch the Arcratel. Whereas, of course, if they did full send a Stone Edge, I would have still been able to live that anyways. Now, I am going to shield the Stone Edge. I'm going to look to overfarm. But the opponent, I overfarmed slightly too much there. I throw the opponent able to swap out, make a double resisted edgeable catch there. That is certainly not ideal for me. And now we are going to reach a Bug Buzz, but again, this is also double resisted. I wish I just threw straight away there. And Bug Buzz, of course, going to get them fairly low actually, but we're going to come back in with the Excalibur. I believe they are one away from back-to-back charge moves. I should be able to Dragon Breath farm them down here, so it's quite likely the opponent will swap back into their Quagsire, and so I'm going straight for Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush, going to connect. It gets the knockout there, and let's see what their final Pokemon is. They come back in. Oh yeah, we already seen it. It is going to be a Lurantis, so we're going to be forced to stay in here, fire off the Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush, gonna grab the final shield, and now we come in with Conkeldurr. Of course, I am resisting the Fury Cutter damage, but Leaf Blade, gonna deal big damage there, and unfortunately, that's now gonna be game over for me because I can undercharge this, but I need to get the knockout here, otherwise they will farm me down, and now they can Incinerate, farm me down there instead, come out with the charge we've loaded, and of course, whatever they throw, Flame Charge, gonna get the knockout, and unfortunately, I lose that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I see Regidrago in the lead. So, this is a fine matchup for me because I can outpace them or potentially win CMP in this matchup here by going for an Icy Wind. If they did throw slightly earlier than that, then that would just be a Vice Grip, which I should be able to tank. I'm now going to shield here. They do go for the Vice Grip, so they're actually going to outpace me to the next charge move. So, I'm actually going to swap out. We've already debuffed them here. I'm going to catch the Vice Grip onto my Wormadam. And like I mentioned here, I am using this Pokemon as a safe swap when in reality, it really is not that safe. But either way, the opponent obviously doesn't have a hard punish, so they will allow me to farm them down. The opponent's actually going to come in with a Jellicent, which doesn't have the best matchup here. However, they've easily put me into range where they can just go for a Hex farm down, but not before we're able to go for an Energy Ball and deal big damage. The opponent is going to go for one extra Hex, so I can go straight for a Glaive Rush here. Glaive Rush, gonna get the knockout, and the opponent's final Pokemon gonna be a Lapras, and of course these Psywaves are absolutely chunking. But speaking of chunking, these Force Palms shredding through their HP. Now, I probably don't need to actually throw back-to-back charge moves here. Instead, I could commit to a full farm down, but you know what? Let's play this super safe here. We can go for Brutal Swing, number 1, grab the final shield. Brutal Swing, number 2, of course, going to connect. It will easily take out the Lapras from that range, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I see Shadow Pidgeot, so this is definitely great to see it here. However, of course, this fire through pressure is a lot. So we're going to go for the Icy Wind, debuff their attack stat. Icy Wind is going to be shielded, and honestly, I can't really afford to shield here just because if they are on Air Cutter, they're going to outpace me to the next move anyways, but they're on Feather Dance, and I'm able to tank that. That is absolutely huge for me because now Glaive Rush gets the knockout, and let's see, the opponent's going to come in with a Shadow Kanto Marowak, but I've got a really strong response here. Mud Slaps, double resisted by the Bug and the Grass typing. I'm able to reach an Energy Ball before they go for a Rock Slide. The opponent no shields. That gets the KO, but they've got a Shadow Talonflame in the back, and suddenly things aren't looking too good for me. Of course, I expect them to go for Flame Charge. If the next Incinerate gets the knockout, it's game over, but it does not get the KO here, which means we fire off Brutal Swing number 1, we get to Brutal Swing number 2 just before they farm me down, and of course, Brutal Swing takes out the Shadow Talonflame, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I see Primeape in the lead, so not a great matchup for me. We're going to be swapping out into Wormadam, and here, yeah, this is just not a safe swap whatsoever. I have to call a bait here. There's no point shielding because Bug Buzz just isn't going to deal too much damage there, but unfortunately, Acrobatics, double super effective, comfortably gets the one shot there. I'm now going to come in with the Excalibur, and the opponent is going to go and fire off a charge move here. I was thinking this should just be an Energy Ball, but maybe I've miscounted, so I am going to shield, and it is just the Energy Ball, so that is frustrating on my end. Should have trusted my instincts, but honestly, sometimes it is hard to tell with the new system whether the opponent had just snuck in a free fast move at a random point in the game, or if I've just lagged a little bit. But either way, they come back in with the Primeape. I have to go for the debuff here. Icy Wind is going to grab a shield. However, unfortunately, they've put me into range where even debuff debuff, Rage Fist very comfortably will be taking me out here. So Rage Fist gets the knockout. We come in with the Shadow Conkeldurr, and this is basically game over. The opponent is going to go ahead and bait with a Rage Fist, but it's just a triple hard countered team. They can peg farm down with the Shadow 2 cannon. Not much I could have done there, but GG's to the opponent. Now into the next battle, we're going to see Credilli in the lead, so a pretty decent matchup for me, depending on what the fast move is. I think most Credilli are actually on Bullet Seed in this meta. Either way, we are going to go for an Icy Wind into a Shadow Moltres save swap, which is crazy to see, but also quite cool to see as well. Bit risky just because there are quite a lot of rollout users, which of course are going to hit for double super effective damage, but either way, we can go for a Glaive Rush here. Glaive Rush going to grab the final shield from the opponent, so at this point, I'm happy to just no shield this. As of course, Shadow Moltres is very tricky for my backline, but now we put them into range where we can just farm them down. Their final Pokemon going to be a Clodsire, which isn't really great for the Wormadam, but of course, Conkeldurr is going to struggle in this matchup, so we know shield, we can tank a single Stone Edge. However, what that does is put me into range where they can get quite an aggressive farm down and come out with a ton of energy. Now, Shadow Conkeldurr is pretty spammy, so this is still fine. I should be able to shield this and outpace them to the next charge move. However, I expect the opponent will try and make a catch back onto Moltres, which they go for, but unfortunately for them, we do not throw the energy. They come back in with the Credilli, and they're actually on acid here, but either way, doesn't really matter. We farmed up to back-to-back moves. Dynamic Punch gets the KO comfortably there, and we could go for Brutal Swing, but actually I believe Dynamic Punch, even resisted, will do slightly more damage there, guarantees the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. You're going to see Mew in the lead. So that is quite an interesting pick here. They do decide to swap out straight away, which is, I'm not really sure what that means. Maybe they're on like Volt Switch as the fast move. Either way, I'm going to chip there. I was hoping to grab a shield. Either way, it doesn't really matter too much because now we can just come in and go for a full Sucker Punch farm down. They can't really come back in with the Mew. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Shadow Beedrill on Poison Jab, which honestly is quite interesting. I'm not really sure what Poison Jab targets here since Fairy types are banned. There aren't really too many Grass types, so I feel like if you wanted to run Shadow Beedrill, either go for Poison Sting as it is a lot spammier, or run the Legacy Bug Bite to target the Psychic types. But either way, they're going to come back in with Mew, and it is on Volt Switch, so that is resisted damage. I'm now going to debuff their attack stat with an Icy Wind. I'm going to shield here. Honestly, I don't have a clue what charge moves they might be running. They go for a Flame Charge, boosting up their attack stat, but that's fine with me. I'm now going to go for another Icy Wind, debuff their attack stat once again, grabbing the final shield, and now I'm actually going to swap into my Shadow Conkeldurr, where I'm able to catch slightly another Flame Charge. Flame Charge, not going to deal too much damage here. I'm expecting the opponent to try and swap back into Beedrill, but I'm barely able to hang on, live the Poison Jab damage, reaching the Brutal Swing, so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. You see Oranguru in the lead, so we are going to stay in this lead matchup here. I'm going to fire off a Glaive Rush just before the opponent is going to throw their own energy, and Glaive Rush going to connect, and now I will swap into Wormadam. Of course, going for Glaive Rush, that's going to debuff my defense there, so the opponent does end up throwing straight away before swapping out into Licky Licky. Now, this is not the best matchup for me, however, we can chip with a Bug Buzz, and Bug Buzz is going to connect. It does pretty decent damage there. Unfortunately for me, Shadow Ball won't quite get the knockout from this range, so it will allow them to get slightly extra farm, which isn't ideal for my Conkeldurr. However, we're still in a pretty decent position. The opponent will be reaching a Shadow Ball, so I'm just going to shield this up anyways. The opponent full sends the Shadow Ball there, and we can now go for the farm down. The opponent's final Pokemon is going to be a Shadow Giraffe Rig, and unfortunately, now that my Wormadam has gone down, we don't really have much play into this Pokemon. I tried to force a CMP tie there, but I actually threw slightly early. If I threw a little bit later there, maybe could have forced a CMP tie, forced their energy, but unfortunately now the opponent can commit to that full farm down. There are back-to-back Psychic Fangs here. My only win condition is if the opponent thinks we've got the charge move and they swap back into Oranguru, but that's not the case. Psychic Fangs number 2 gets the KO there, and unfortunately I lose that game. But GG's up on there into the next battle, and we are now running Kecleon rather than the Wormadam. So at this point, we are going to fire off a Glaive Rush here, and unfortunately, there's going to be another situation where we do lag by a turn at the start of the battle, and as a result there, even though I tried to throw it on good timing, we end up CMP tying with a Glaive Rush, which is not ideal for me. I was looking to swap out there, but either way, they're going to come in with a Grumpig, not ideal for me, but we can go for the Icy Wind, and then I will swap out into my Kecleon. Now, of course, I've just debuffed them here, and they're going to go for a Dynamic Punch, so I'm actually going to no-shield this just because if I shield there, the opponent can just swap out anyways, clear the debuff, and then have a non-debuff Dynamic Punch for later in the battle. Whereas now, they come in with a Toxapex, but unfortunately, because I let the move go through, they get the perfect farm down there. So they come out with quite a lot of energy. Unfortunately, Conkeldurr doesn't have a great matchup here. However, I am going to have to shield anyways, and potentially we do still have some play if I'm able to pull off a catch. So I'm going to wait 2 turns, swap into my Baxcalibur, and I'm able to catch a Brine. Brine resisted damage, but it gets the knockout anyways, and now I just have to farm up to back-to-back Brutal Swings before the opponent reaches the dynamic punch here. Brutal Swing number 1, grabs the shield. We're firing off that second one straight away. No messing around here. Brutal Swing gets the KO, and can we reach another Brutal Swing before they farm me down? The answer is just narrowly yes, we're able to do so. I believe that was a CMP tie. We take out the Toxapex, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. I can see Shadow for Alligator in the lead. So this is going to be a fine matchup for me. The opponent is actually going to go straight for a Hydro Cannon, which is fine with me, as of course, that is resisted damage. It is still going to do quite a lot of damage there. And now they swap into a Shadow Primate. So at this point, I'm going to go for the Icy Wind, debuffing their attack stat, and then swapping into Shadow Conkeldurr. Now, I do expect the opponent to bait here with a Rage Fist. But no, they full send the close combat, and unfortunately, they've just regained a ton of HP there, as of course, they did just go and refund the damage from a Force Palm, but of course, they are now debuffed. I do shield this time around, and they bait, but wait a second here, we do still have play, as they've got a Drifblim in the back. Drifblim taking huge damage from the Sucker Punches, from the Thunder Punches, and I'm able to swap out and make a catch here of the Icy Wind. Icy Wind, gonna be taking out Baxcalibur, and now can I commit to a full farm down? I'm going for it. And yes, Kecleon able to pull off the farm down there, and that should now be game over. I've got back-to-back Thunder Punches loaded. First one doesn't quite one-shot the for Alligator. Doesn't really matter. I commit to the fast speed farm down, Sucker Punch, farm down for Alligator as well, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. I see Shadow Kingdra in the lead. So, I'm going to outpace them to a Glaive Rush before they can hit me for something that is going to get the knockout. Unfortunately, Swift is going to get me very low there, but I can survive this, and they cannot live the Glaive Rush. So, we grab a shield advantage. I might as well just choose to stay in here, because if I swap out, I'm going to be switch locked, and I don't give up that much farm here. Instead, now we're going to come in with the Kecleon. I'm going to shield at the last second, and they do go for the Surf. So, that actually does not allow them to reach another Surf, which is good for me. They're going to come in with Cross. I'm going to come in with the Shadow Conkeldurr, but unfortunately met with a Jellicent. And whilst yes, Brutal Swing is super effective damage, Brutal Swing is not really going to put them into range where I can Force Palm farm them down. So I'm going to no-shield this. They bait with a Surf, but actually that doesn't quite get the KO. And unfortunately, we just come in and we go straight for Dynamic Punch there as I try to click on the Brutal Swing. I don't think this really impacts the battle that much, but that is a bit of a weird bug there, because of course I wasn't trying to throw a Dynamic Punch, but because we fainted and came in with the Kecleon instantly, it pulls up the Dynamic Punch there. So a little bit annoying, but either way, GG's to that trainer. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Licky in the lead. I believe this was in the lead anyways. They're going to go straight for a Body Slam, which is fine with me. I'm just going to bank the energy and then come in with my Kecleon. Now they go for another Body Slam here. Of course, they can't full send a Shadow Ball because it is double resisted. They swap into Mantine, but that is a very questionable decision because we've got access to Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch, double super effective. Voshi doesn't quite get the KO there, but we can, of course, no shield. This Twister also narrowly does not get the knockout either, and so I can go for a second Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch number 2 gets the KO up against the Mantine, and let's see, they're now going to come back in with the Licky, but we can come in with the Shadow Conkeldurr, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Fearow. At this point, we can go straight for Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing grabs the first shield from the opponent, and here I should be able to outpace them as long as I don't go for the Icy Wind. Instead, just committing to a Glaive Rush. So here I'm going to farm up, going for the first Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush number 1. Gonna be no-shielded by the opponent, which is a smart play here because now they can get energy on the Licky. However, it's not going to help them enough as we go for a second Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush, of course, dropped my defense, giving them less energy. We come in, we actually get the farm down really quickly there. That was also really confusing to watch, but either way, GG's to that trainer. Into next battle, and here is a big problem. Shadow Annihilate just completely destroys my entire team. I believe this battle I did start off 1 turn behind, which isn't ideal at the best of times, but certainly not ideal when we're going up against a Shadow Annihilate because it means I actually miss out on reaching an Icy Wind there. But either way, the opponent is going to fire off a Rage Fist, which we do call the bait. However, that doesn't really help me all that much because, I mean, I'm saving my shields. When am I actually going to have a chance to use them at this point? It's very likely that they realize we are super weak to this Pokemon, so the opponent is going to double shield the Shadow Annihilate, and yeah, that puts me in a really bad position here. I can finally shield here, and I should be able to Force Palm farm them down, but unless they've got like Licky Licky and Furret in the back, we've probably lost this game already. But let's see, the opponent comes in with a rollout Ledian, and the opponent actually makes a really nice play there, catching a Brutal Swing, which isn't really going to deal too much damage into Furret. Of course, if we did go for Dynamic Punch, then maybe we had a slither of hope there, but I don't think 2 Brutal Swings plus the Force Palm damage would take out Ledian anyway, so I think we would have lost that game regardless. But either way, GG's to that trainer into possibly the final battle of this video, leading into Oranguru, again going to connect with the Glaive Rush, and then swapping into my Kecleon. The opponent going to go for a Trailblaze there, which is quite interesting considering they're not choosing to stay in anyway, so boosting up their attack stat doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But either way, we go for Dynamic Punch, dealing big damage there, and at this point, we're happy to no shield. The opponent goes for Body Slam, which is going to get me very low, but they cannot commit to the farm down. They're forced to throw some more energy, so as a result, I will just no shield this. I'm going to come in with the Shadow Conkeldurr, just a single Force Palm will get the farm down. They come back in with Oranguru just to be farmed down there, and it's going to be game over. They've got Crustle in the back. They can only hit for resisted damage. A bait with a Brutal Swing. It's not really a bait here just because that will put them into range, or I can comfortably farm it down. I'm just going to play this super safe. I'm going to shield whatever. They do full send the Rock Wrecker, but we can just Force Palm, farm them down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there. I guess that was not the final battle. Instead, this is going to be the final battle for sure. We're going to see a Hypno in the lead. So, the opponent going to choose to stay in here. And I'm happy to no-shield this. This can only be an Elemental Punch. I guess it could be a Side Shock as well. But it is going to be an Ice Punch there, which is fine with me. I'm going to farm up to back-to-back Glaive Rushes here. Firing off the first one is going to grab a shield from the opponent. And now I'm going to go for a second Glaive Rush. Glaive Rush number 2. Going to deal big damage. The opponent actually double shields the Hypno. That's fine with me. We can now come in with the Kecleon, dealing decent damage here with the Sucker Punches. Thunder Punch, not going to hit very hard, and they have now just revealed their entire moveset. They come in with a Dragonair, so I'm going for the Dynamic Punch, and now I'm going to swap into Shadow Conkeldurr. I do expect a Wrap, but that's absolutely fine with me. Of course, they're going to debuff my defense, but that's fine. We can go for a full farm down, and because we're now playing on the new code here, whilst that Confusion does huge damage, it's actually not going to register as Brutal Swing gets the KO. We get refunded the damage there. Their final Pokemon, gotta be Reggie Draco, and that is certainly game over. Conkeldurr, when all shields are down, Dynamic Punch comfortably gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.